Greetings folks and welcome to the Electromaker Show. This is your roundup of all things maker and embedded and lovely. And on this week's show we chat with Brandon Satrom, who is the Senior Vice President of Blues, and we'll be talking about their collaboration with Arduino. They're adding wireless capabilities to the Arduino Opta line. Our in-house gadget guru and engineer Robin Mitchell will also be showing you how you can build a Proxmox cluster using Zimablades, which are x86 single-board computers that do not require much power to run and have no fans, and you'll see in his video why that is a really quite refreshing change to his normal huge loud server rack that can pretty much heat his house. We'll be looking into mmWave sensors and how you can put them into your project, and also a little more information about the new Pi 5 2GB variant, because there's a lot more going on there than just the lesser RAM. It's an entirely new cut of the chip, and we'll be talking about what that means and why I didn't talk about it any sooner. Hint, it's because I had no idea. I'm not an engineer. It was very difficult for me to... Okay, on with the show. We're going to start this week's show with an interview with Brandon Satrom, who is the Senior Vice President of Blues. And I've talked about Blues extensively on the show. I'm always very complimentary about the way they do things, because for the same reason I say every time, Blues can add Wi-Fi or cellular or LoRaWAN or now satellite to your project. And all of the cards fit into different node carriers exactly the same way. They all work via I2C, and you tell them what to do via JSON commands. Literally, if you've done one thing with any Blues node card, you can do everything with them. It's just a question of learning the right JSON command. They're incredibly easy to use. Now, on the screen, however, you're seeing something a little bit different to what you normally see when it comes to Blue stuff. And if I show you this, it might give you a bit of a clue as to what I'm going to be talking to Brandon about today. Because the Arduino Opta is part of the Arduino Pro line, and it is an industrial PLC. They call it a micro PLC because the idea is that it is cheaper and smaller and easier to mount than most existing industrial PLCs. And in terms of cheaper, it's an order of magnitude cheaper. If you've ever looked into learning about industrial PLCs, the courses are very expensive, course materials are, the hardware itself is prohibitively expensive. Arduino have really gone out of their way to make sure that the Opta fits into that world. You can learn traditional engineering speak on it. I've forgotten the name of the most popular PLC programming language at this particular moment, but it's completely compatible with all of that, or you can just program it using the Arduino IDE as you would with anything else. Arduino approached Blues to say, hey, could you add cellular connectivity and LoRaWAN connectivity to our boxes? And that's exactly what they have done. The rest of it I will leave to the interview with Brandon. I would like to point out right now that this introductory price that Blues have for the kit, which includes an Arduino Opta Lite and the Blues wireless box that comes with either cellular or LoRaWAN. If you get the cellular version, you get a bunch of bandwidth bundled with it already, so you won't have to pay any fees on that for quite a while. This is an obscenely cheap price, it really is. So yeah, both of these links will be in the description, but with no more further ado, I'll pass you over to past me talking to Brandon Satrom. So on this week's show, we have talked about the new wireless Arduino Opta kit that Blues have put out, and as I had an interview with Brandon already scheduled, it seemed like the perfect time to talk about it as well. So Brandon Satrom, first things first, thank you so much for giving me the time to chat today. I think most people watching the show will be pretty familiar with Blues already, because we've talked about what you guys do a fair amount. We reviewed recently the LoRaWAN starter kit, and I've been doing a giveaway for that. And I reviewed the Wi-Fi and cellular note card. And independently of one another, both me and Robin kind of came to the same conclusion that the way that Blues work with microcontrollers and the way that you can talk to the note cards, it's all JSON. It's all very one way of doing things, which is really refreshing. I suppose the first question would be, with that, which is, in the past worked so well with any level of board, whether someone's working with CircuitPython through to C coding to whatever, what made you think of working with Arduino on what is functionally an industrial PLC?
That's a great question. Obviously, working with Arduino, a brand that has really defined for many of us our first experience with embedded technologies. Definitely was the case for me. Me too. And I know for millions of others, Arduino is this sort of interesting animal of a company that has done a lot of work in open source and open reference hardware to build accessible tools and technologies for engineers getting started. But many of those technologies, many of those engineers also then took the work they were doing with Arduino into their enterprises, into industry, into their factories. And Arduino saw an opportunity about 3 years ago to lean into that rather than being the rather than living into the reputation of, this is what I used to hear all the time, is you'd prototype on an Arduino or on a Raspberry Pi, and then you'd throw it out and do the real thing.
Yeah.
I think Arduino asked themselves the question, well, does that really have to be the case? Could we build a line of products that had those missing pieces around security and around resilience, around higher grade industrial chips and things like that? And so with their Pro line, they really got down that space, and they actually started talking to us in September of last year. So it's been almost a year now, about marrying this product, the Opta, basically their Uno for the enterprise, but doing one very critical thing that they weren't able to do previously, which is to add additional radio access technologies. And so the Opta comes in a few different flavors. There is one that has RS-485. There's one that has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, but they were missing that sort of third, that secret unlock of cellular. And so we have been working with them over the last year for the wireless for Arduino Opta, a product that's just meant to mate very well into the Arduino ecosystem and sort of plug in very quickly and easily, so that you can add Blue's cellular technology into an existing Opta. And the great thing about this, and Ian, you mentioned yourself, you had looked at you all had reviewed the note card. There's just a note card inside here. I mean, this is a box with a note card inside of it. And so it's the exact same experience of using JSON to talk to the device, of using our cloud service to route data. We have an integration with the Arduino IoT Cloud as well and their SDK. So it's really end to end, starting with the Opta through our cloud service into the Arduino Cloud itself. And this has been really exciting because it gives us an opportunity to partner with a company that we have a ton of respect and admiration for, and bring cellular technology into their pro business and the folks that are building PLC solutions.
Absolutely, yeah. And one of the things, wherever I end up posting this interview, I'll probably have already done an introduction talking about the Opta a little bit and Blues. But the Opta itself is quite an interesting thing, because I interviewed Stefano when they put out the Opta Learning Kit at Embedded World last year. And both on camera and off camera, one of the things that we sort of chatted about is that while the Opta is designed to be able to step very much into that world of industrial PLCs and reach, all the same safety and compliance goals as those kind of things, we're talking about sort of an order of magnitude difference when it comes to things like price. And I think if there's one thing that maybe isn't massively clear, I suppose, especially to outsiders and non-engineers like me. I consider myself an enthusiast rather than any kind of an engineer, because it's the truth. And for me, PLCs were very much a closed world for a while until I sort of had to look into them. But the Arduino Opta is a very interesting idea, because they don't sort of call it a fully fledged PLC. That isn't to say it isn't capable of those things, but the pricing is different and the way you can program it is different. And now with the fact that you can attach it to a network without having to necessarily attach to the Ethernet or the internet of a factory, it's more like an entirely different way of working with industrial tools. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Arduino likes to use the phrase micro PLC to refer to the Opta, and we really like that, and we're fans of that approach. We were with them at a show in Chicago in May called Automate, where there were a lot of industrial engineers that came by, and it was folks that work with Siemens PLCs and Rockwell and what have you. And time again, the story, the narrative that was being told is that this isn't meant to necessarily replace those for core functions. It's not about ripping the Siemens off the wall or the Rockwell box out and replacing this, as much as opening up a new class of PLC applications that maybe you can't justify a $10,000 PLC, but you have something that's just a few $100, and now it makes sense to bring it online to make sure it's under monitoring and control. And so that seemed to really resonate, that there's this class of industrial automation solutions that for longest time, businesses haven't been able to justify the price tag of 10 grand or more, because the thing being monitored maybe isn't that expensive, or it's not mission critical to the business, but it is important. And it is something that, hey, these companies, they'd love to be able to monitor if the price was right. And I think Arduino has built something with this where that is the case. And to be able to add cellular then to that, the combination of the two is less than $300 compared to 10 grand or more. It's actually a really nice entry point into being able to explore new PLC solutions.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's funny. It almost reminds me a little bit, kind of the early days of single board computers when Raspberry Pi and all that kind of stuff were around, where you get people that had been working with computing and network engineering for a very long time, who would suddenly start having these extra items that they could have as part of the workflow because it's a $30 board that they can just repurpose any time. And you don't have to have an entire server rack doing something. If you want to try something out or add functionality that you wouldn't normally be able to, it's an extra option rather than a replacement of any kind,
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And not only that, but the expansion module ecosystem that Arduino has built. I mean, this is actually kind of a cool thing. If you get one of these, there's this aux port on the side of the board. And this is just this little 10-pin solderless connector. It's a press fit connector. And they've defined effectively, it's kind of like their version of Stemma QT or Quick or Grove, in the sense that you literally, any one of their expansions, you plug it in and it works, or you plug our expansion in and it works, and then you can daisy chain out the other side. It's a really nice way to your point of extending that experimentation. If this doesn't have enough, you can grab another analog expansion and add that, and now you have more IOs, now you have more relays. And so they're creating this concept of chainability and composability into PLC solutions, which for the longest time required a mess of wiring and Cat5 cables and who knows what just to get this thing mounted. And now you can get something up much quicker, start experimenting, see if it works, and go from there.
For sure, yeah. And one thing I wanted to sort of touch on, again, I did mention it briefly before, but I think one of the other things as well that is becoming more, I certainly hear it kind of mentioned more, which I think is a sign that it's the way things may be going somewhat, is that the variants that you have currently now are a variant with the Wi-Fi / cellular note card inside it, which of course you could use the Wi-Fi side of it, but you have that cellular option. Right. And then there's the other version, which is the LoRaWAN note card, and you can specify which one you want when you get one of these. Is that correct?
You can, yes.
Cool, okay. Because the only reason I wanted to mention that is just that I feel like for a lot of people in the professional world as well, one of the reasons that they may be forced into getting very industrial grade gear is that the IT manager on site is absolutely just doing their job when they say, you're not plugging anything into our network without me knowing exactly what it is. There's corporate security for a reason, and industrial security. Whereas if you are plugging this into a system and it's not touching your network at all, it's communicating directly with the Note Hub and sending data that way via cellular, it completely cuts out the need for you to worry about network security. And I think this is something that's it's going to be massive, because you're going to be able to have connected devices that work in a way that don't have to mess with the internal networking that your company already has.
Absolutely.
But that wasn't really a question, actually. It was more just a statement.
I'm happy to comment on it, because that observation is what led Arduino to actually approach us about this product in the first place. They had the Opta in market for about 18 months or so, and had been getting a number of customers that were effectively expressing that exact need of like, we absolutely love this unit. It's, this is an operational technology person speaking to them and saying, we have a need for this. The price point is great. The features and layout are great. I love it. It's industrial grade, but I can't get access to the Ethernet at my facility, or I can't get permission to use the Wi-Fi available in the facility. I'm not going to stand up my own. And so for that percentage, and it was an outsized percentage of their customers interested in the Opta, they came to us and said, we'd love to be able to offer cellular, because it's not meant to be an end run around IT for the sake of just ignoring IT. Like you said, there's a good reason why corporate IT has those policies. They're trying to protect the network. They're trying to protect critical infrastructure of their business. And at the same time, for a company or for an OT organization that's trying to justify the value of connectivity, they're trying to do a POC or a pilot and understand what unlock would we be able to achieve by bringing this thing online, having to wait 6-9 months or argue for permission to get connectivity when you can just throw this thing on, start streaming data, show the value, and then make your case with data, I think becomes a really interesting value proposition for a lot of these folks. And so that was really the impetus of adding cellular and LoRa as options for being able to bring these types of solutions.
For sure, yeah. And I think actually one thing that I think some folks might be interested in, especially if they maybe haven't kind of looked into what Blues do, mostly because they are working maybe already in an industrial embedded setting. It hasn't really been in their wheelhouse yet. If a common workflow that I came across with Blues is just that you have your device, you have whatever it is doing, and then there's the communication with the Note Hub. And I think maybe for people who aren't initiated and don't really know exactly how that workflow works, let's take a case in point example. If you did have an Opta and you'd have one of the new wireless kits for it, and you had some cellular data, and you wanted to monitor a machine over time, say a temperature sensor, what does that workflow sort of look like? So you can program the Opta using Arduino IDE code, presumably. How does that data go from your Opta through the note card wireless attachment and then up to the Note Hub? And then once that data is there, what can they do with it next?
Yeah, that's great. The workflow is pretty similar to using a note card, period. The funny thing about it, the Opta itself is effectively inside of the Opta is an Arduino STM32H7. And so it's much like working with a Portenta H7 or any other Arduino MCU, in the fact that, to your point, you can program it with the Arduino IDE. You can actually also program the Opta with there are 5 compliant PLC languages for automation engineers are more used to things like ladder logic or function blocks or structured text. These are all things that are relatively new to me, but a lot of automation engineers have been working with this in years and years. And Arduino did a great job of making sure that those are supported in this as well for folks that are used to that world. So you can really do either. And then both of these, talk to, if you're plugged into our expansion, you talk to the note card over I2C, the same way that you would if you were working with our Swan MCU in our developer kit and talking to the note card. You're sending JSON to the note card over I2C, as you said, Ian. It's all JSON in, JSON out. That's one of the intentional appeals, because so many of us came from the non-embedded world, myself included. It's really nice to have that flexibility. JSON to the note card, and then that data ends up flowing into our cloud service, Note Hub. And from there, you've actually got a couple of different options. Our cloud service, we're not an IoT platform company. We're not building an IoT platform. What we have in Note Hub is effectively a data router. It's meant to be an intermediary where you then take the data from your devices and spray that out wherever you want, whether it's AWS or Azure, or one of the great visualization platforms like DataCake, which we're big fans of, or Ubidots or others like Losant. I mean, those are all great examples where you can put that data really anywhere where it needs to go. One of the things that's unique about the Opta expansion is that we did also add support for the Arduino Cloud SDK. So we have a direct integration with the Arduino Cloud as well. So you can actually work directly with Arduino's cloud, and we actually have the note card baked into their SDK. So our SDK is sort of commingled with theirs. So you have a couple of different options. You can talk to the note card directly, or you can use the Arduino Cloud SDK if you're used to using it and you have for years. We just sort of transparently operate as the new transport under the covers. That data shows up, goes through our cloud service, and then into the Arduino Cloud as well. And so we're trying to sort of meet developers where they are. If you're used to working with a note card, you can still use our SDKs. If you'd rather stay with the Arduino Cloud, you can do that as well. And then the data goes where you want it to go: Azure, AWS, Arduino, DataCake, really anywhere and everywhere.
Fantastic, yeah. Well, I mean, it seems like the natural addition, and I can totally see why Arduino approached you folks about doing it. And as I said, like way back when I first sort of got my head around what Arduino were trying to do with the Opta, or at least part of what they were trying to do, because the learning materials they have for the Opta are like hands down the most lowest barrier to entry into this kind of world that I've ever seen. Because of me having to talk about this kind of stuff, I have looked into a few of the alternatives, and there are some great resources out there, but the cost of the hardware you need to even get started with it is prohibitive. And so this is kind of an amazing kind of way of putting it together. If someone did want to kind of get started with this, am I right in thinking that when if someone was to go to the Blue shop today to get one of the new wireless add-ons, you don't just get the add-on? It is actually, am I right in thinking that the Opta Lite is actually bundled in with it, right?
Yeah, so we do bundle the Opta Lite as a part of this as well. And so the combination of the Opta Lite and our expansion is $299 US right now. And we'll have that available probably for the next couple of weeks at that price. And then you will also be able to purchase the expansion in Arduino's distribution channels, and that'll be later on this fall. So if you're already an Opta customer and you're looking to buy just the expansion itself, Arduino will have those available shortly. But for now, for Blues customers, for folks new to this space, we wanted to give people the experience of the two in concert together, because it really is a great experience for starting in this world.
Fantastic, yeah. And as always with these interviews, as viewers of the Electromaker Show will know, anywhere that this ends up getting posted, whether you're hearing this on the podcast or whether you're seeing it on YouTube, links to the Blues shop will be in the show notes. And we usually end up coming back to this kind of stuff. So if you are one of those people who's already an Arduino Opta user, if that has turned up in the Arduino shop, by the time you see this, there'll be a link there as well. I'll make sure that gets updated. But yeah, it's kind of serendipity that this happened exactly when it did, because obviously we met today to chat about something different, which we will do in a moment. But yeah, the Arduino Opta is something that I kind of found excited. And as someone who's been singing Blues' praises for a while, I'm kind of stoked that you guys are working with Arduino on it. But yeah, thank you so much for taking me through it today. And I'll make sure that there's links to all of it underneath this video when folks see it.
Awesome. Thanks, Ian.
Now, a few months ago, we talked about the Zimablade single-board computer that Icewhale market as a single-board server, and with good reason, because with its x86 architecture, very low power consumption, it's a perfect thing for doing home networking, and it has a bunch of really nice features. You can change the RAM in it. It has a PCIe slot. You can attach graphics cards to it if you wanted to do some AI tasks. But one of the things we mentioned that it might be good for was a cluster of computers. After all, these are low-power, cheap single-board computers, and if you cluster them together, you're effectively making them much more powerful than they would be, without having to have a hugely expensive setup with a huge amount of power draw going somewhere in your home. These are fanless after all, so it's also completely silent. Now, this did not go unnoticed by our in-house educator and engineer Robin Mitchell, and his latest Electromaker Educator video is exactly that: how to build a cluster using Zimablades. Now, this is a tutorial video that will show you how you can set up Proxmox, which is some fantastic software for making clusters over several Zimablades. It basically, the tutorial just takes you through how to put the hardware together and how to set up Proxmox. What you do after that is up to you. You can set up virtual machines on it. You could set up shared storage on it, shared tasks. There's many, many things you can do with it. It's very much the Swiss Army knife of home lab computing. Once you start working with clusters, you can really start getting quite big quite quickly and get a huge amount of computing power going without any issue, really. But what makes this video special, at least from my perspective, is that Robin really knows what he's talking about. A fair chunk of this video is him unboxing the Zimablades while talking about issues with home networks. And he's talking from experience, because Robin has a chunky network rack in his house that he uses for absolutely everything. And he says he loves it. He wouldn't change it for the world, but it's so noisy, it uses so much power, and the heat it generates can practically heat his house in the winter. This is all things that you get away from when you start using smaller, low power things like the Zimablade. Now, you're not going to get the same amount of power as you do out of a big server rack, of course, but do you really necessarily need that, especially if you're just learning about this kind of stuff? And again, the beauty of a cluster is that if you add more to it, you get more power by just adding computers on top of each other, effectively adding more processing power and RAM every single time you do. Now, I am not the authority here. I have no idea about it, which is why Robin was making this video, but I thoroughly enjoyed this. In fact, Robin's Electromaker Educator videos recently have just been on a tear. His Lego Planetarium one is fantastic. If you haven't seen that, it's worth checking the channel for that too. He automated a Lego Planetarium with an Arduino, gave it voice commands, so you could say spool forward 4 weeks and it would accurately do it. It was kind of awesome. And this one is, yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. If you've ever wanted to get into clustering, the Zimablade is a perfect option for it. Although I'm fairly sure as well that if you were to follow this tutorial, you could do it with any x86 computer. Just you're going to then start stepping up in cost in terms of how much power it costs and things like that. But yes, if you would like to find out more about it, there will of course be a link to it in the description of this video, and you can find the video just on the main Electromaker YouTube channel as well if you just want to skip to it and find it yourself that way too. Just two quick announcements. One, the Arduino Plug and Make competition that we started in the previous show is still ongoing, and we wanted to give enough time for people to enter. Just a quick reminder that if you want to enter the Plug and Make contest, you need to enter this on the Product of the Week video. We've changed that recently, and so there will be a bit of an overlap where I will still take competition entries under the Electromaker show for this time. But yes, you need to head to the video for Plug and Make. If you look in the description, I will put Plug and Make video as one of the things from this this week's show notes, so you can head there and enter the contest. And all you need to do is be subscribed to this channel, tell us what you would do if you did win it, like what would your project idea be, and leave the hashtag plug and make on that video in the description. The second announcement is my hat is still on holiday. I understand that this is not the hat. I have been wearing the same hat on this show for 4 years, so a change of hat is definitely worth a mention. I came back from visiting family and my hat did not. And so far it has not been found. I think it may have stayed on the ETE and decided to go all the way to Hamburg, and it's probably having a wonderful holiday in and of itself there. But I thought I would just bring attention to that because I like that hat. I hope I get that hat back. Just a very quick reminder this week, if you want to support us and you want to support us financially, the best way you can do that is by going to electromaker.io/shop and having a look at the things that we sell. Because we sell pretty much everything from everyone. We have some named vendors like Raspberry Pi and Arduino, but we also sell things from third-party vendors like Sparkfun and Adafruit, Pimoroni, and many, many others. Alternatively, if you want to support us here on YouTube, a like always helps. Making sure you subscribe to the channel is always appreciated. And leaving a comment, of course, helps with algorithmy things, but it's also just a really nice thing for me because I make the show alone in an attic, and it's nice to know what people think of it, what people are working on. It's just always very, very nice to actually get those comments back because they do come directly to me and I read every single one of them. Anyway, on with the show. Now, recently we talked about the Raspberry Pi 5 2GB variant and the fact that it costs only $50, and we talked about some benchmarks of it. But one of the things that Eagle Eye viewers may have noticed is that I conveniently skipped over talking about the new way the processors are being made. See, the Broadcom processors in Raspberry Pi 5s can be used in a wide variety of different computers, and the Raspberry Pi 5 doesn't necessarily need all of that functionality. So putting it on the die is extra work for making each chip. And what they've done now is by using optimized D0 stepping, which until recently I had absolutely no idea what that meant, they literally put less on the die itself, meaning it costs less to produce each chip, which is partially why they can make it so much cheaper. But I didn't talk about it because it wasn't something that I had any understanding of, and I didn't want to pretend I did, and also because I had no idea what that might mean, and I wanted to wait until someone had done some kind of benchmarks of it. And surprise, surprise, the Raspberry Pi guy, Jeff Geerling, has done exactly that. Now, I'm not going to go any deeper into this than the title that you can see here. The new 2GB Pi 5 has a 33% smaller die and 30% in idle power savings. Now, he does go into a bit more depth of that in this blog post. There is also a set of GitHub issues. That was where I originally was reading about this. Jeff covered that in GitHub issues and said he was going to put it into a blog post and potentially a video, but Jeff has also just welcomed the latest member of his family. And on the very off chance that you do see this, Jeff, congratulations. So yes, Jeff is a little bit busy in baby world to maybe make a video about this right now, but I always almost prefer Jeff's blogs anyway because they go into a great amount of detail and I can read them in bed next to children. I understand the grind of being a YouTuber with children. But in short, if you would like to know more about it, I'll leave a link to this in the description of the video. And I just found it quite interesting that there are actually some marked differences in the chip, even though it's supposed to work the same way, and they seem to be mostly positive. Now, human presence detection is one of the newer aspects of home automation and general building automation that is really quite amazing, because human presence detectors can detect the presence of a human, but that person doesn't have to be moving. Now, in the past, if you've ever been in a place that has automated lighting and you've been in a meeting room, you may have actually been one of those people that had to wave to keep the lights on. That has actually happened to me in a job that I had once, and it's fun. Fun with a non-capital F, like a small F fun. But human presence can be detected without any of that using mmWave sensors. And there are ways that you can incorporate this into your home automation design, or even just get them to play with and learn about at a very, very low cost. Now, Tech Dregs has made a very simple and to-the-point video about these low-cost modules. There are a few different variants of them, although it would be remiss of me not at this point to point out that we do sell one of these modules in our shop, and they only cost $10. They're very, very cheap, and they all work more or less the same way. So I will leave a link under the video if you would like to mess around with them. That will help us out greatly if you do buy it from us. But the video is what I really want you to look at, because not only is this a great description of mmWave sensors, it also goes into how you can incorporate it into your home automation designs, and also a few gotchas you should probably know about. So for example, they tried to put it behind an e-ink display, it couldn't penetrate the e-ink display. So they tried to put it into the frame of the e-ink display, it couldn't penetrate the thicker plastic, so they had to cut out a little hole in it so it was about 1 millimeter thick, and even then there was still a little bit of messing around backwards and forwards. But what this video really does show is just how easy it is to get one of these up and running with an ESP32. They're using it with ESP Home and Home Assistant, and once you set up a few YAML files, which you don't really need to actually change anything in. Those YAML files are pulled into ESP Home, and you can tweak all of the settings on a mmWave sensor in a GUI, meaning that you don't need to code in all of the different things. And as he shows at the end of his video, he's at a point now where it almost always works to detect him in the living room, and he's tweaking it to a point where it's always going to detect him and won't even detect when his dog walks through the room. So the granularity on these things does seem to be quite impressive. I never really messed around with this, and I honestly wasn't aware that these things were so cheap until I saw this video. I've been getting a couple of these through the mail, so I can start fiddling around with them myself. I feel like it's going to be a very useful thing up here for the Attic of Dreams, where there are some things that I only have on and want on when I'm filming the show, like studio lights, for example, and I wouldn't want those things to stay on if I had to step out to answer the phone or go and speak to children or do something in the house. So for me, I'm definitely going to be fiddling around with these things, and I found this video to be a great resource, and I hope you do too. As always, linked in the comments. That has been our show for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Brandon. I really did enjoy speaking to him. We got on very well, both on recording and off. And we have another interview with Brandon coming up in a few weeks' time, where we'll be talking about StarNote, which is Blues' new satellite component to their already wide range of different kinds of wireless capability communication things. We'll get to that when we do. As always, thank you so much for the support that you show here, whether it's on YouTube or by buying stuff in the shop. Just a quick reminder that this show does also go out as a podcast. If you'd like to listen to that, you can find it with all good podcast people, podcast providers. There's a link to that in the description of this video. And we also have a Discord server where if you want to come and hang out, I am also connected to that. You can get through to me there anytime. There's a link to that in the description as well. But for now, I hope you have a fun, safe, and creative week, and I'll chat to you soon.